If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. Today we are talking the complete mental health meltdown of Craig of Fight the Flat Earth. I mean, this is one of the most hilarious and saddest and pathetic things that have happened in flat earth debate history that I've seen on the internet. And we'll be going over everything. I mean, there's so much goofery. I wasn't even going to comment on this because I kind of feel bad for Craig. Because, I mean, obviously he's mentally disabled, but to humiliate himself like this, it's kind of sad. He doesn't have any friends or family that care about him around him that would prevent him from completely and utterly ruining himself. I mean, more than even I did in my logical analysis. I mean, he ruined himself more than anybody has done online that I have seen on any subject. I mean, this is so sad, but also hilarious depending on how you look at it. I mean, obviously, ethically, there's an issue. Because to laugh at somebody having a mental health episode complete meltdown, just this mental health spiral like Craig did, on one hand, I mean, is it ethical? On the other hand, he did it to himself and he's claiming he's not mentally disabled. So I don't know. I mean, I'll leave that up to the listeners. As always, if you find the podcast interesting and informative, you can help support the podcast, help bring logic and reason back to a world where it is quickly going extinct. Obviously, people like Craig are the poster children of that going on. You can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. If you're still not getting them, make sure to like and comment on more videos. That's how the YouTube algorithm works. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patreon's a good priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. While we're on the subject of YouTube or even Twitter, I mean, Craig was having his meltdowns all over Twitter. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, even Bryant Myers and Michael Sartain, I mean, they took their L's and quietly disappeared. I mean, I know Myers was crying about he popped up and started crying about Flat Earth a little bit more, but not specifically his annihilation on the logical analysis. And Sartain, actually, yeah, he took his L. And, I mean, at least they had the mental wherewithal. I mean, we can't say they're completely mentally disabled because they had the mental wherewithal not to continue to humiliate themselves. Whereas Craig, I mean, he was so triggered. I mean, think about the level of narcissist one has to be as to scramble and make an entire episode dedicated to pretending you weren't decimated while proving your decimation was actually worse than portrayed in the initial video. I mean, Craig counted over 500 times. He had 500 instances of incomprehension and I have to admit when I'm wrong. I've been saying that he's not on a kindergarten or first grade English level. Him and his bootlickers, they're not even on a preschool level. So every time he couldn't comprehend, he had an illiterate moment, he counted it as a fallacy for somebody else. So, I mean, before we get into why, because I'll break all that down and prove how none of that, you can't make a fallacy if you're not making a claim. So obviously Craig doesn't know what a claim is, what an argument is, what a conclusion is, or obviously the scientific method, or even basic English. So he counted over 500 moments of both English and scientific illiteracy on his part and pretended somebody else committed a fallacy. I mean, has anybody utterly ruined themselves and paraded them humiliating themselves to that degree on social media? I've never seen anything like it. I mean, wow, we've truly scraped the bottom of the barrel of these scientism cultists and these mentally disabled goofs pretending that they can comprehend something and just getting completely triggered when they're exposed for their complete and utter cluelessness. So just real quick on the subject of YouTube and Twitter. So YouTube has a filter, and I know there's a whole bunch of settings. I don't really want to mess with them. If goofs like Craig, I mean, obviously, you know, mentally they're whatever level they're at. If all they can do is make these profane ramblings in their mental health spirals, and like a lot of his so-called supporters, I mean, I don't know if they're just bots or trolls or they're paid. It's kind of hard to imagine, obviously. I mean, call this a fallacy. I call out my own fallacies when it's actually a fallacy. I don't know. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, I don't actually claim anything is true or untrue. So I don't know if they're trolls. Saying I don't know is not a fallacy because I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. I'm going over various different theories. I mean, just think about the level of mental disability we've plummeted to when goofs can't even comprehend basic preschool level English. What is the motto of this entire podcast? I do not claim anything is true or untrue. Can someone who's not just not making any claims, but explicitly going out of their way stating that Craig or whoever, they might be correct about their conclusion. So they might be disabled, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. So I mean, literally, I couldn't be further from the poisoning the well fallacy. Like, I think that's mostly what he pretended I was doing when I was pointing out his clear deficiencies, while not stating he was wrong and going out of my way to state that he could still be correct. So that's, not only is that a neutral non-fallacy position, that's as far from committing a logical fallacy as one can get. So anyway, YouTube filters all these trolls. So like, if you're just that much of a mental midget, all you can do is ramble profanely, or tell people to unalive themselves, or whatever the goofs in the chat were doing, Craig's so-called supporters, if they're even real people. Obviously, YouTube's going to filter those comments. There's nothing, I'm not going to do anything about that. I'm not going to remove the YouTube, I don't even know if I can remove the YouTube filter. I mean, I know there's different settings, but I'm not going to mess with that. Because if you're that much of a mental midget, all you can do is ramble profanely. I mean, you know, don't be surprised if your comments aren't showing up. That doesn't mean I blocked you or I deleted your comment. That just means you're too dumb to make any points without using profanity that YouTube considers excessive profanity. Same thing on Twitter. Like, a lot of people are actually ghost banned, including myself. So like, a lot of replies don't show up. Like, I actually had to go. There was actually a hater, another one of these clueless goofs and Craig bootlickers. I mean, I don't know if they're paid shills, whatever. I actually wanted to discuss points with them, but both of our replies were being censored from each other. Now, unlike this particular goof, I didn't accuse them of blocking me or deleting their comments, because obviously I have some kind of logical capability, because I don't know what happened in the comment. I don't know if it's Twitter censoring, or they deleted it, or whatever, or they blocked me. So I'm not going to pretend I know and throw around these accusations like the clueless goofs do. But yeah, I mean, just being logged out, a lot of these comments aren't showing up. So again, that's not me blocking or censoring anybody. That's YouTube and Twitter doing that. Same thing in the live streams or in any of the comments. And sometimes YouTube's like kind of bad about it. They'll flag comments for spam that are actually don't have profanity. Some of them are in support of what I said, some of them not. I mean, just randomly. It seems like there's a lot of randomness in the spam filter. The best way to combat that is simply to just comment 2 or 3 times. That is not something I am deleting. So, yeah, for all the clueless goofs who thought that was the case. Now, here's why Craig is literally the dumbest person that has ever participated in any debate on any subject. And this is not a fallacy, and I already explained why a little bit, but I'll explain further. All Craig did in his triggered stupor and just his mental health meltdown was pretend I didn't even state what fallacy was what. Like, how brain dead is he, or anybody who thinks that I'm going to stop at every single fallacy? That would take 100 hours. And I clearly stated, now again, this is why he's not even, him and his bootlicking troll goofs, they're not even on a preschool English level, because I clearly stated what fallacies were committed. Like if he got, let's say, 3 or 4 fallacies in a single sentence, and then I didn't stop it, I just counted the fallacies as he was talking. After he was done, when I did stop it, I clearly stated he just committed a bunch of false cause or circular reasoning logical fallacies. He claims citing evidence is not a fallacy, hallucinating that evidence can only be non-fallacious. Because if he's presupposing, for example, gravity exists or whatever, that presupposition was a circular reasoning logical fallacy because he's claiming something is or isn't the case because gravity has already been proven when it hasn't. Or if it has, he needs to present that information instead of committing the circular reasoning logical fallacy. So every time he commits a circular reasoning logical fallacy or false cause or false dichotomy, which was 99% of his fallacies, I'm not going to stop it every time and explain the same thing I already explained 100 times. That's why, again, I'm not going to say first grade English, preschool level English is a requirement here. If he's not on that level, then clearly he wouldn't understand the fallacy, which he doesn't. And why is that not a logical fallacy? Because I'm not claiming he's wrong. I'm actually going to the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm saying even if he's mentally disabled, this is why I bring up like the crack addict on the street. Now, a crack addict on the street, whatever they're screaming, that doesn't mean they're wrong. A fallacy, ad hom or poisoning the well or whatever they want to pretend was a fallacy, it would only be a fallacy if I'm painting the picture that their conclusion or claim is wrong because they're this crack addict or not even on a preschool level. I'm actually not only am I not doing that, I'm doing the opposite and saying they could still be correct. Again, only preschool level English is required here, but Craig and his bootlickers, they can't muster it. They're not even on that preschool level. Again, why is what I just said not a fallacy? Because I didn't claim they were wrong about the conclusion. It kind of goes back to if you're making an observation, if something is waddling and quacking and it looks like a duck and you call it a duck, that's not an ad hom. They're pretending that's an ad hom and, of course, just ignoring everything. So basically, Craig counted over 500 times. I know it was hilarious. He couldn't even count properly. He had to have help to even get up to 500. He had to have people in the chat. Although I was surprised he was able to go to the second and third digits. I actually wasn't sure he knew the numbers higher than single-digit numbers. Again, why is that not a logical fallacy? Because I'm not claiming he's wrong. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. That's what these clueless goofs can't comprehend. That's why that's comedy gold. Never has somebody utterly ruined themselves to the degree that Craig did. He was that triggered. He had to make an entire video where he humiliated himself, proving that he's not only illiterate in English, he's completely scientifically illiterate. Like, the goof was complaining. I couldn't handle watching most of it. I just skipped around. But in certain points, the goof was pretending I couldn't edit videos because I left the graphic with the scientific method up, including the independent variable, dependent variable, and controls. Notice how he didn't mention those. If somebody does have a timestamp where he went over it, I can look at it. But I skipped around, and he was only complaining that the graphic was still up because the graphic was showing how everything he was saying was completely false about the scientific method itself. Again, that's not a fallacy. If you want to say that was my claim, that's not my claim. That's an empirically verifiable definition. So if you want to say the dictionary is wrong, or the encyclopedia is wrong, or the peer-reviewed scientific paper from Harvard that I was citing is wrong with the URL clearly on the screen, which was kind of hilarious because Craig just dismissed that as saying those are crazy quacks that are wrong and don't understand it without even looking at what they said. That's clear ad hom. So it's kind of, I've actually never seen anybody more clueless than Craig. He doesn't even have an inkling of what a logical fallacy is. Like, not even an inkling, because people like Sartain or Bryant Myers, they have some kind of cognitive function where you can say, oh, maybe they're kind of in the ballpark of maybe having the capability of understanding what a fallacy is. But Craig is so bottom of the barrel. All he can do is cry that a graphic clearly demonstrating how everything he says proves his scientific illiteracy is still on the screen. Like, he's complaining about it, because obviously if it wasn't on the screen, you wouldn't be able to know how everything he's saying is completely not in alignment with the empirically verifiable definitions of the scientific method. I didn't make those definitions. So really the only positive claims I made are that the empirically verifiable definitions or scientific literature says what it says, which anybody can verify by going to the URL. You don't have to take my word on anything. I actually put it on the screen, even underlined in red, so that even the mentally disabled crowd, that's at least on a preschool English level, they would be able to read it, and it still didn't help. Like, I went out of my way to appeal to the lowest common denominator, so that even the most clueless of goofs, the most hopelessly indoctrinated scientism cultists, as long as they were on a preschool English level, they would still be able to understand it, and Craig couldn't. I mean, what does that tell you? I mean, so he just made this entire video humiliating himself, counting how many times he doesn't understand what an argument is. Because how can something be a logical fallacy if I'm not actually claiming anything is true or untrue, and specifically going out of my way to say that Craig could still be right about his conclusion? The only positive claims I made about anything are empirically verifiable definitions, which, if people have an issue with that, I mean, they can take it up with Webster's or any of these dictionaries and encyclopedias, because those aren't my definitions. Those are all empirically verifiable definitions, because words have meanings. So if we're going, I mean, what does 2024 have in store for us? Because now if people like Craig and his bootlicking supporter goofs, if they're pretending that these words don't have definitions, or anybody referring to an empirically verifiable definition is somehow committing a fallacy, they're poisoning the well by saying someone can't comprehend basic English. Well, if they can't comprehend basic English, how is that poisoning the well? How is that different than calling a duck while going out of your way? I'm actually steel manning his argument. Like, he was so utterly clueless. A lot of times I was saying that Craig could still be right and the theory of relativity still says this or that. I was actually doing his job for him, and he was so mentally disabled, he thought I was speaking against it. I mean, that's the level of goofery this is. That's why, like, we really have to appreciate people like Craig. And, like, what's next? Are they going to pretend numbers don't have values? So if somebody wants to charge, like, $1 for something, they can charge $500 because there's no difference between 1 and 500. Is that what's next? Again, that's not part of my argument. I clearly go out of my way to say what is or isn't part of any argument. So if none of this, how can something be a fallacy if it's not part of an argument? I mean, again, this isn't rocket science. So if I don't have a position and I don't claim anything is true or untrue, I mean, even look at the Eddington so-called observations. I clearly said I'm not saying that those papers reporting over 400% errors, that's even true. The error rate could be far greater or lower. I don't claim anything is true or untrue. I simply said the paper said what it says, which it clearly does, that anybody can verify by going to the URL. So this is the level of mental deficiency and disability we've sunk to now. I mean, we have to give Craig a medal as well. I mean, nobody has been this dumb so far in any flat earth debate. So we really do have, I mean, this is just, I mean, it's remarkable how he proudly parades him demonstrating that he doesn't even know basic English words. He can't comprehend any of these definitions. Again, none of this is a fallacy because he could still be correct about his conclusion. I'm not saying he's wrong about the conclusion. But at some point, if somebody is claiming an empirically verifiable definition isn't what it is when it can be clearly verified, that's not a fallacy. If I claim like the grass is green outside and anybody can go check that it's green, it's not fallacious for me to claim that it's green. And you know what's sad about all of this is that I even had to explain any of this. Like the fact that any of this even has to be explained. I mean, we're reaching new lows. I really never thought I'd have to reach this level. Like, I'd have to dumb this down. Like, I dumbed it down as much as I could, and they still don't get it. This video is just simply an explanation of why they don't get it. I don't expect Craig to magically, get some functioning brain cells and comprehend all of this. But if he gets an English tutor, perhaps he can figure this stuff out. The other thing that was just absolutely hilarious is that Craig's own listeners, like anti-flat earthers, were roasting him in his chat because he kept counting what he perceived as insults as fallacies. Now, I've actually gone over this on many podcasts. A so-called insult is not a logical fallacy if it's used in addition to an argument, or if it's not used in a way to state that the person that is so-called being insulted is wrong because of it. For example, I mean, obviously Craig has a mental disability, but that doesn't mean he's wrong. He could accidentally be correct about things. I never claimed he was wrong. Not only that, I claimed that the mental disability, I specifically claimed the mental disability didn't mean he was wrong. So I literally preempted a fallacy and went as far to the other side of a poisoning the well fallacy as possible. Obviously, he was too clueless to know that. But there was at least one or two listeners in his chat who understood that, and they were roasting him the whole time, and he was too clueless to realize it. Not to mention, I mean, he doesn't even know what an insult is. An insult is something thrown to offend somebody. I'm actually not trying to offend him in any way. I actually hope he's not offended. I'm making observations, not insults. Like, if he's short and fat or whatever, and I call him short and fat, is that an insult or an observation? If I'm trying to offend him, it's an insult. I mean, can everybody believe this? Here we are, and I have to explain preschool level definition. This is where we are. I mean, I haven't laughed this hard in quite some time, so we really do have to be grateful for Craig. I mean, he's such a glutton for humiliation. I mean, he's just willing to humiliate himself to this level for all of our entertainment. I mean, how can we not appreciate this level of goofery? That's why I asked in part 2, or even part 1, like, what amount of money would a person take if he's a paid shill? Again, I'm not making any claims. What fallacy am I committing by discussing several different theories, none of which I'm claiming are true or untrue? And yet I'm somehow committing a fallacy by not making claims. I make no claims or conclusions other than, of course, empirically verifiable definitions of words that any child knows or can look up. And again, that's not my claim. That's the claim of the dictionary. I'm simply saying the dictionary exists. So this is the level we've reached where this even has to be explained. I mean, that's what's really sad about all this. And of course, we do have the ethical dilemma. I mean, Craig clearly has a severe mental disability, but we've never seen anybody this narcissistic and this triggered that they had to make an entire video and needed help to count to 500 instances of their incomprehension while pretending those instances of incomprehension are another person's fallacy. I mean, like I said, I haven't laughed this hard in a really long time. I wish Craig nothing but the best. No ill will at all. I appreciate the level he was willing to sink to completely humiliate himself. I mean, obviously, he was completely decimated in the logical analysis. I mean, I objectively called it whatever. For the people saying I'm not objective, too, that's another point. A lot of these anti-flat earth troll goofs. Watch my analysis of David Whitehead versus Nathan Oakley. I mean, I was as objective as possible. I'm counting fallacies where I see fallacies. I'm not perfect. I'm sure I miss fallacies for everybody. I probably did miss a couple of Caleb's fallacies, and I probably did miss a couple of Craig's fallacies. I'm not perfect. I can't count every single one. I try, but I'm not perfect. And notice how all the troll goofs that said I missed fallacies for Caleb, not a single one of them provided a timestamp. What does that tell you? Again, I'm not saying they're wrong, so obviously that's not fallacious, but provide evidence, provide a timestamp. So this was quite the way to end the year. I mean, this level of hilarity of Craig willing to sink himself to sink himself to these levels of utterly humiliating and ruining himself while pretending other people are committing fallacies simply because he's illiterate. Again, doesn't mean he's wrong about the conclusions. Doesn't mean he's wrong about conclusions. But clearly, objectively, He doesn't know any of these definitions. He's whining and complaining about a graphic of the scientific method being on the screen. I mean, that should tell you everything. And he also fast forwarded through all the explanations, clearly demonstrating what I was saying, while pretending he was getting fallacies for no reason when the reasons were clearly given and he didn't comprehend them. Is that a fallacy to simply describe what happened? If you're watching a basketball game and someone's dunking on somebody else a million times, pretending the person is not that's being dunked on is not preventing being dunked on, that's not a fallacy to call what's going on. Or like in a boxing match, if somebody's constantly getting knocked down, it's not a fallacy. Like if they can't hit the other guy, it's not a fallacy to point out that they're not landing any punches if they're not landing any punches. And the fact that I even had to explain that, the fact that this video even exists really shows where humanity is in 2023. And even scientism cultists, is it just me? Or have scientism cultists just completely plummeted in just basic mental acuity? Because even guys like Sartain and Bryant Myers, at least they comprehended some points. There was something they comprehended throughout the debates. Craig had nothing. I mean, literally nothing. So I'm going to close this out with 2 points. One, can someone commit a fallacy if they're explicitly not claiming anything is true or untrue? Two, how much money would it take for someone to humiliate themselves to the level that Craig did? To just publicly ruin themselves like this and prove they're completely illiterate in every sense of the word. Again, not my definition. You want to go argue with the dictionary? Go argue with the dictionary. It's nothing to do with me. I'm just saying the dictionary exists. If they want to say it doesn't exist, that's fine. Burden of proof is on positive claims, of course. The dictionary exists. It's on me to prove it. Go to dictionary.com. Go to any bookstore. Go to any school, they'll have a dictionary. You can see it, you can check it. Do not take my word for it.
There's no amount of money.
Oh man, I really can't believe we got to this point. I mean, this is just flat out insanity. Oh, one more thing. Regarding the reciprocal zenith angles, obviously Craig and all his bootlicking goofs, they didn't understand what I meant by that. Obviously, I wasn't talking about the topography in any one little area because they didn't understand anything I said, obviously. Otherwise, they wouldn't have responded as they did. Not a fallacy. That's an observation of what they did. I'm saying the convexity, even if we take the math as correct, I'm actually not sure it is. There's actually dispute in the exact way that they measure. I'll go over this in part 3. I actually thought Caleb was going to go back and forth with him on it, which is why I didn't do a deep dive on it. I just went over it super quick. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it. I haven't finished. There's still part 3 coming. I haven't finished it. Even if Caleb does rebut it, if he does or he doesn't, I will go over the issues with the zenith angles, but just super quick. I'm not disputing the result or the graphic that Craig had up on his screen regarding the convexity, the angles adding up showing convexity. Like, it's actually astounding the level of mental disability where they can't comprehend that you can have a tabletop with a convex surface. Like, imagine it, like even a half globe. You can have a flat plane have a convex surface. Now, the topographical features would be along the entire surface, which I'm not disputing. Craig is not disputing. Flat earthers or globe. Nobody's disputing that. But notice how Craig thought that's what I was talking about it, because that's how mentally disabled he is. Again, that's an observation, because if he did comprehend, he wouldn't have said what he said. I mean, this is empirically verified by his own words. Just go back and listen to his meltdown about the reciprocal zenith angles and pretending I didn't understand it, because he didn't understand what I was referencing. I wasn't referencing individual little areas with topographical features. I was referencing the entire convex result. If we take it as a given, which it is not a given, but let's give him that. Let's say Craig and whoever brought that information forward, let's say it's correct for the sake of argument, because it doesn't matter, and that's the real point. It doesn't matter, because if the surface of a flat earth is convex, If it's like an eye or a lens where it's curving upward, that doesn't prove a sphere. That proves a convex surface across X amount of miles. If you want to make the claim that it would all turn into a sphere, you'd have to verify all the distances between continents, which, of course, burden of proof is on positive claims, and Craig didn't do that, which is why I responded as I did, and I can't even believe I had to go over that. Like, we've sunk to preschool levels, and he still doesn't get it, and the bootlicking trolls don't get it, or they're just fake and stupid, or they're paid shills. Again, I'm not claiming any of these theories are true or untrue. So how can that be a fallacy? And to all the people saying that I should debate this guy, I mean, first of all, I don't hold a position on anything. Second of all, even if I did, to the people that saying I should debate him or go talk to him, would you go try to debate or have any kind of real meaningful conversation with a 4-year-old at a preschool? Like, would you actually go to a preschool and try to have a legitimate, serious conversation with a 4-year-old or even a 3-year-old? Would you go to daycare? Would you go to daycare and try to sit down and logically discuss something and definitions and the scientific method with a 3-year-old? Would you do it? Before telling me to do it, ask yourself, would you do it? Big appreciation for all the Logical Mind Shock listeners out there. I hope everybody enjoyed all of the comedy Craig has brought forth. I mean, he's literally the only guy dumb enough to not take the L, but dig deeper and make an entire video dedicated to humiliating and ruining himself and posting it publicly and posting links to it on all these various social media platforms. So big thanks, Craig. No, seriously. Big thanks, Craig. I hope everybody had a great holiday. Hope Craig had a great holiday. I still don't believe he could tie his shoes. Not part of an argument. How can something be a fallacy that's admittedly not part of any argument? Another big question for the goofs out there. And Happy New Year for those who believe this is actually the new year and celebrate it. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.
There's no amount of money